Welcome to the Diesel Podcast presented by DFC Diesel. Kyle and Kevin, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys today. Kyle, I always have a great time chatting with you. You've been on the podcast before, but we have a new guest on, Kevin. It's a pleasure to meet you. And you guys have a really awesome topic today to discuss, which I know a lot of listeners have asked us for. So welcome both of you to the podcast.
Thanks, Patrick. Always happy to come on with you. And I brought some heavy hitters this time with Kevin in, and we're gonna get a little nerdy today. So for those that are looking for a deeper dive, I had to bring in my backups. So let's have some fun.
That's what people love. I wanted to start with you, Kevin. It's the first time we've had you on the podcast. Tell us a bit about yourself, what you do at Hotshot Secrets, and then we'll jump into some cool oil analysis stuff.
Yeah, I'm in charge of research and development here. Been with the company for 10 years, chemical engineer, and basically everybody in our department is gearheads. So we love what we do. We're always trying to be early adopters of new technologies, and so it's kind of how we roll.
One of the I think most important aspects whenever we talk about, trucks in general, but specifically when we get into oil, is oil analysis. People have questions about, like, what is it? What should I pay attention for? How often do I need to do it? And they love that technical approach to that whole topic. So Kyle, where do we start when we are discussing oil analysis?
Well, first of all, do it. That's the big thing. It's amazing to me how many people have never even got an oil analysis done. So everybody from, we have huge agriculture operations, farming operations that have really expensive equipment. On our performance side, on the racing and the polling side, insanely expensive equipment there. And then the everyday guy, they say that a vehicle's the second most expensive investment you make in your life next to a home. So, and we know how expensive these diesel trucks are and the systems in them. So it blows my mind how many people have never done an oil analysis, and it's such a simple thing to do. It's extremely affordable. There's so much information that you can gain out of it. And that's what we kind of want to talk about today, is try to kind of crack through those people to maybe the first timer that's never had an oil analysis done. And it's like I said, it's like going to the doctor and getting a blood test. There's a lot we can determine from it. Hopefully it's all great news. But one of the most important things is the preventative side of it. We can spot problems before they become catastrophic, and you can address issues before they become real problems. So it's just an important aspect that any vehicle owner of any size, shape, or, regardless of your application, just should be done.
Hey, Diesel fans, we wanted to let you know that our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 20% off your entire cart discount code for you. If you go to kershaw.kaiusa.com, use code TDP2520, get you 20% off your entire order. They got a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different handle designs, different opening mechanisms. So if you're in the market for a new knife for EDC or hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house, they've got you covered with a bunch of different choices designed to meet any budget. We really appreciate them offering that discount code just for you guys. So if you're in the market, head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com and use code TDP2520 and get 20% off your entire cart. When we talk about problems, which has been something we've discussed a lot on the podcast before, Kyle, whether it was fuel gelling or protecting not just like emissions equipped engines, but also the older trucks, it's almost a cornerstone now, I think, of what the automotive aftermarket industry is. Like, we want these trucks to last because of the price of them. What sort of things can we find from an oil analysis, and why do you think most people don't do them?
I think most people don't do them because they're just not aware of it, and it seems like a complicated process. And I also feel that some people that may have done one before have not got a interpretation of the data. So there's a lot of data points that come from it, but it takes a little education to understand what you're reading then too. So once you and this is something I love doing with our high performance guys, our racers. The first thing I do with all of our race teams is put them on an oil analysis program, and let's start checking what's going on in there. As they become interested in it, and you start to learn a little bit about it, and I think after this podcast here, you should know enough to do some damage, and just getting to know it a little bit allows the average guy to be able to read an oil analysis much better. Does not need to have a highly technical degree for it. And then they can spot problems that they can take to companies like us. We offer oil analysis, and we reach out to customers when we see a problem on their analysis, but we also have people reach out to us and say, I just got one done and I don't know what it says. Can you walk me through it? We're happy to do that. And that's something that we'll try to do today to kind of cover those bases. And, give you a couple examples would be head gaskets. That's something we catch a lot, when you're not going to feel it right away. You're not going to, if you got a head gasket leak and you got some coolant coming over, you're not going to see it. You're not going to feel it. It's going to be a very slow process to create a problem, but can have a catastrophic end to it. A simple oil analysis, because the world we live in with analysis is parts per million. So we're getting really down, really nitty gritty. And then the other side of it would be the example I often show is when I'm talking to people about some of the products we offer at Hot Shot Secret that are very unique, and we'll kind of touch on as well. But I often have the guy that says, oh, I love my oil. I have no problem with it. Everything's great. I'm like, well, how are you measuring that? Well, my engine's never blown up. and I say, there's a big difference. There's a lot of gray area between, everything's going good and my engine blew up. And if you're not doing oil analysis, those are your two options. Either things are going good or things went really bad. Whereas if you can start to dissect what's going on in the process before it becomes a catastrophic failure, you can head it off long ahead of time. Like we can catch that head gasket failure before it happens. So it's a cheap, easy insurance that can help out the average guy up to the guy that's protecting a really expensive investment.
So how does it work? How do I start and do one? Well,
you start off with something like this, which is just an oil analysis sample cup. Matter of fact, as I mentioned, we do oil analysis at cost here. So something like this, it is a 4-ounce clean container, sealed. So one important thing we like to tell people is it's important to take a really clean sample too, because since we're looking down at parts per million, everything happens very quickly if you're not taking a sample correctly. So the way I advise to take a sample is during an oil change. I like to have a warm engine. So I like to get the engine running because all of your particulates in that oil are going to settle when that engine's off. So if you go to change your oil in a vehicle that's been off for a long time and you take that oil fill screw off and you try to dip that oil coming right out of the beginning of it, it's going to give you a false reading of what that whole oil holds because all those heavy metals are going to be sitting down at the bottom. So if you start the engine, get it flowing, get the oil circulated, it disperses everything, and it's going to give us a better sample because we want this 4 ounces to be representative of what the whole engine oil is, not a collected bunch of junk at the very bottom. So I tell my guys for the best sample, get it as hot as you can without burning yourself. So get a nice flow, pull your plug, allow it to start to drain, dip your sample cup in mid-drain, seal it off as quickly as possible because we don't want anything in this.
And it is all about the details. You want to make sure that maybe you don't put the cap in your pocket because you can pick up some particles in that area. These are certified clean bottles, but to also make sure it's a representative sample, you want to, maybe rinse out the cup 2 or 3 times, and the third time, then you put your cap on. Just little details that ensures that you have a representative oil analysis.
And I can tell you what not to do, and this often happens, if there's somebody trying to check on an engine failure or something, oh, we already drained the oil, but I got it over here in the oil pan. I'll just pull it out of there.
Yeah.
It's going to be contaminated at that point. Now, worst case scenario, if it's all you got, we can still look at it and analyze it, but getting a clean sample is very important. And then inside your kit comes a piece of paper that asks some information. What kind of engine are we looking at? What kind of oil is in there? How long has it been in there? If it's a drag racing application, it's how many passes have been made on the engine rather than it's been 50,000 miles. We can look at 10 passes, et cetera. Because maybe you can speak to this a little bit, Kevin, but one of the unique aspects of an oil analysis, it's not just kind of a blank palette of here's what we're finding in it. A lot of it is based on trend analysis. So not only does one oil analysis is good, two oil analysis is great. We really like to see 3, 4, and we can start to start trend lining. And even more importantly, on the very first analysis, it's really measured off of like what we call a virgin analysis, which would be taking a samples directly out of the bottle. So the lab is looking at what has changed in that oil from where it started. So if you send in a blind oil analysis and the lab doesn't know it's a group 4 PAO versus a group 2 conventional or a different additive package, it might say, oh, wow, this is really low in zinc. Well, no, it's just a different oil that didn't start with that much zinc. So the starting point's important too, right?
Really important, yeah.
So it's important to notify what kind of oil it is and how it's used. That's not to skew the test at all. That's actually to dial in the test so they can expect how that oil's been treated in the engine. And then simply you drop it in there. One thing that we do cool at Hot Shot Secret is we also include a prepaid mailer. So it doesn't even cost you anything to mail it in, and we know it's coming back to the right spot. And just drops in a bag and sends to us. And then about 2 to 3 days, usually for processing for us. And the customer will receive an email with the full detailed report of their analysis. If it's something that gets flagged, then somebody from our lab will reach out to the customer to walk them through that. There's a few of us here that get every single oil analysis that comes to the company. I'm one of them. I don't know if I should be, but I do that because I just kind of keep an eye on when my racers analysis come in. I can make sure they're seeing it. But Kevin's eyeballs go on every single oil analysis that we process, and we process a lot. So you got some smart people looking at this stuff, and we're kind of an open door to help you be able to determine what you're looking at.
When it comes to that first sample, is it something where a customer could say, hey, I'm running this brand, this weight of oil, and you guys would have that, say it like as a record where you would know, or should they take a sample of that brand new, brand X and send it to you guys first if they're looking to do this regularly and put something together?
Yeah, the lab has baselines for the oils. Our oils, most of the popular brands of oils. So it's really important on, like Kyle said, where you're filling out the ticket that you do put the kind of oil. The viscosity is really important because when we're interpreting the data and telling you if it's in spec or not, we use, say, a 40 weight to make sure that it's no more than 16.5 centistokes, no less than 12.5 centistokes. Basically in spec. And
I will say one of the things that does happen is a lot of times people don't fill them out completely. So they might have the type of oil on there, but they won't put the viscosity. And you get a scary thing in your email box where you get this oil analysis and the top of it says red critical, and you see some red boxes and people are like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And lo and behold, in there, the viscosity might be come out to a 40 weight that gets red flagged because the lab thought maybe this should have started at a 50 weight. And if they didn't tell them that, and then they're like, oh no, I didn't fill that box out. It's actually 40 weight. Like, oh, well, you're right in spec then. So for all the flags where the lab's kind of just highlighting stuff like we need to take a closer look, it's often because they don't have the beginning information. So as you mentioned, for a first oil analysis, first thing we tell people is make sure you dial it in really good with all the information. And then once you're kind of in our system, what's really kind of cool, let me steal this from you. We'll share some of these oil analysis with you that maybe you can get up on screen, but we'll stack your oil analysis as well. So you can look back at your previous ones and see each one as they trend. And as we spot different issues or things that we want to address, there are things that we can work on, whether it be tightening up your oil interval, re-additizing the oil, adding a bypass filter to keep it cleaner. It's just kind of a health report. And then, we want to get somebody so it's a clean bill of health on that. And if you don't know, you don't know. So it's a good place to start.
I really like the way you walked me through how to take the sample accurately or the best way that I can. So I wouldn't know how to, necessarily where to get it. I'd probably know not to go over to the container it's been sitting in, for a few days and just collecting stuff. But I think starting efficiently is important. But then the next thing that jumps up to me is, okay, how am I going to interpret this? How am I going to know the data that I'm seeing? What is important? I'm sure there's maybe some visual indicators, like you mentioned, red or critical or different things that might see, but how do I interpret what I get back?
Well, let's jump into a standard oil analysis point. Actually, I want to back up real quick, Patrick. There's one thing I should add on taking a sample. The example I gave you is how to take a perfect sample when you're changing your oil. A lot of times people are looking to take a sample mid-interval or maybe a problem they wanted, but they're not ready to dump their oil. Couple ways you can do that. You can actually add a sample valve to your vehicle. So you can, we actually, in our bypass filter kits, have an inline sample valve. So you can just open the valve and actually squeeze out 4 ounces of oil into the cup, nice and clean, and keep the engine running. And that's what we do for our long haulers and people going long intervals, and that's how they sample during their oil interval. So there's ways to do it while you still are keeping the oil in the engine. On top of that, there's different type of extraction devices, for lack of a better term, transfer pumps. And Harbor Freight sells a cheap little transfer pump that you can drop the tube down into. They even have them for the dipstick hole. They've got them where you can just drop them in the crankcase and just pull out a few ounces of oil without having to drop the pan, and dump everything. So just wanted to say there's a couple other clean ways to do it mid-interval, not just when you're dumping the oil. But let's jump into the categories first, and we'll kind of cover what is tested and what comes up on that. The first section that everybody sees on an oil analysis report is the wear metals. So it's a column that shows all the different metals that we might see as a byproduct of the engine, different parts of the engine. So you have iron, chromium, lead, copper, tin, aluminum, nickel, silver, cadmium, vanadium. Starting to get out of my, want to butcher that one?
Yeah, a little bit. Vanadium.
Vanadium.
Pretty close.
Vanadium. So these are theoretically, you don't want to see anything here. That means, there's some metals wearing. Now, you always will. Engines naturally eat themselves. The whole goal is to get these numbers as low as possible to extend the life of the engine. That's all an engine is a machine that eats itself slowly over time. Or you can be a crazy, 10,000 horsepower tractor puller or a blown Hemi, race car and eat yourself in one pass. But that's what we all try to avoid. So there's nothing else they'd see in a wear metals that would be introduced by the oil or any outside thing. It is just a byproduct of engine wear.
It is, yeah.
So the next section there is your multi-source. And finally, the additive package. So the additive package is really just what we're going to see in the oil. So it has nothing to do with any wear that's coming from the machine. It's actually a measurement of what is in that oil. And the additives in this are calcium, phosphorus, zinc, and barium. I better stop saying some of these names, but I'm going to pun on this next category. So that's really a collection of the additives in the oil package itself. This middle one is called multi-source, and this is where oil analysis gets kind of unique and interesting. Some of them might be additive packages from the oil. Some of them might be introduced by potential problems or other issues in the engine. So while it's a black and white scientific report of how many, and in this we got silicone, boron, sodium, potassium, magnesium, titanium, molybdenum, manganese, lithium, and antimony. Now, I'm not the smart one, he is, but I'll tell you right now, we see a lot of silicone. Well, right away, I've learned, because I've been educated by these guys, that's usually dirt. So when I see high silicone in a racing application, no big deal. These guys have open intakes. They're sucking in sometimes small children on the size of these turbos. So it's like, you're going to get dirt in there. Now, in a closed system, in a over-the-road truck, you don't want to see a lot of dirt in there, or you might have a hole in your filter or a leak somewhere or a band clamp that's gotten loose. And so it's a bigger flag for us. Other things like potassium, when we see potassium, it could potentially be coolant based, right?
Yeah, a lot of the multi-source, they come from oil or the coolant. That's two most common sources of these additives in this category.
And molybdenum is a real common moly. Moly's a very common anti-wear, so it's more on the additive side, but it's in the multi-source section because it can also be...
Yeah, diesel antifreeze is sometimes have moly in it.
Yeah, so you don't want to keep moly just as a potential oil additive, because if you have a coolant leak, some of this high, long distance, the heavy duty stuff like our 750K stuff could have some moly in it on the coolant side. So we put it in the multi-source because it really does take a little more analysis. You don't want to just assume, oh, that's the moly in my oil. It needs a closer look. Now, it may be something that you have to put 2 and 2 together, and I think that's what we'll get to in this next segment when we kind of look at some of these oil analysis. But sometimes it takes that extra connecting the dots. So I saw some high moly here. Oh, that's a little bit more moly than I think is in standard in the oil. Well, if there's some potassium also in there, well, if there's potassium and a high count of moly, chances are you got some coolant in there. And then we can have a coolant test and go from there. So it's almost like an investigation, like a forensic investigation, where you start with a baseline of all these data points, and then you start to look at common trends that kind of point towards what a potential issue would be, or how to correct it. So those are the big main ones on the front page that you see. And we'll dive down into some examples of this. On the second page of the standard oil analysis, and ours isn't much different than everything else out there you see. They're generally very similar. One thing that does make ours different for our standard oil analysis, we do provide a total base number, a TBN number. Mm-hmm. You want to explain what TBN is?
Yeah, it's basically the neutralizing ability of the oil. So it's one of those additives that gets consumed over time. You know, a new diesel oil would have maybe a 10 as a starting TBN, and then when it's getting towards the end of its life, it may, as it gets depleted, it gets down to like a 3.
And Patrick, you and I have talked about long intervals before, and that's one of the things we look at when we say there's really 3 major factors that we look at in an oil analysis that will tell us it's time to change your oil, because that's one of the biggest questions I get about oil in general. And they say, well, how long can I go on my oil? And they'll say, well, what about that oil, Kyle? Well, if I use that oil, how long can that go? And I kind of irk when I hear really any oil company make a claim on exactly how many miles this oil can go, because every vehicle's different. Every vehicle treats the oil different. So the only way to really dial in a perfect interval and getting the most bang for your buck out of the oil you're using is by doing an oil analysis and looking at that. And the 3 things that make you change your oil, number 1 is too dirty. And there's ways we can help that: bypass filtration, changing it earlier, so forth. Number 2, it's fallen out of grade, which means the viscosity is sheared and your 40 weight oil is now down to like a 35 weight, 30 weight, and it's not the proper thickness to give you the film strength to protect your bearings, etc. And number 3 is when you've depleted up those detergents too much that now the acids are combating the oil, which then are like a domino effect, start taking out everything else in the oil. So that's where the TBN number comes in. It's a very important number to us. Uniquely, we make a product called TBN Booster that allows you to re-additize your oil and bring that TBN number back up for those guys looking for longer intervals. But that's just one of the columns here, and that shows you either base or acid number. We show base because it's a diesel. People do acid tests though too. That'd be more for...
They do, like hydraulic oil is a common oil you'd use a tan test with.
Right. So you can decide if it's a base or oil. Then the last parts here are really, well, I'm sorry, I almost missed your favorite. There is a viscosity test, of course, so that's going to show you exactly the weight of the oil. And he's going to tell you why that's the most important in a minute. And then finally, your contaminants. These are the parts we don't want to see anything. There's another part like wear belts. We don't want to see contaminants. So everything like a water test, glycol, fuel dilution, soot, all the stuff that can get in your oil that we want to keep as low as possible. We'll give you a measurement of that, as well as oxidation. The final aspect is particle count. And particle count is merely a measurement of the particles in the oil and what size they are, how many and what size. It's just another piece of the puzzle that once we start looking at some of these oil analysis and we see, oh, high levels of copper, high levels of iron, there's some potassium in there, then these guys take a look at what size. Are they 4 micron size? Are they 14 micron size? And then using these data points, we can paint the picture, the story of what's going on in the engine.
I wanted to ask you a question about the metals.
Yep.
Like say I went and bought a brand new truck. It had 7 miles on it, and I did an oil sample, sent it to you guys. And then, I don't know, say 50,000 miles later, I decided to do another one. Or say I bought a truck with 50,000 miles or something. Is the amount of wear something that can vary from new to 50,000 miles on it? Is that something that would be accounted for in the data that I'd get on this?
It definitely does change. In a new engine, of course, you're breaking it in the early miles, but we'll see even after 10 or 15, 20,000 miles in a diesel, we'll see iron as an example. It'll start to trend down as you get more miles in the truck. Another interesting thing we see on oil analysis is the copper. In a newer engine, that oxidation layer hasn't covered up the fresh copper surfaces, and we'll see copper levels high, which normally that could be concerning, but in a new engine it's just naturally high because the surfaces haven't been covered up with oxidation yet.
Common question we get from you guys a lot is, hey, I need a diesel engine. I either, I can't wait this long to get one, or normal place I get stuff from it just takes too long, or they don't have the parts in it that I need. Maybe my truck's not stock, or I tow heavy with it. I don't want to go back with just a stock engine. DFC Diesel is a sponsor of the podcast. We worked with them, hand in hand on doing episodes, answering technical questions. They have a complete lineup of Cummins, Duramax, and Power Stroke remanufactured engines that are set to a standard of ISO 9001 2015 standards, which is a huge deal in the aftermarket. And there's certain levels of quality testing, validation that are required for that. So when you get one of those engines, the type of quality that's built behind it with an industry-leading warranty that's really comprehensive. And the other thing with that is, sometimes the options that are out there, it's a basic OEM engine. You want a little bit more. You don't want to have the same failure again. So there's a bunch of different series of engines that they have, from core, street, tow haul, and also the Speed of Air series, which we've covered on the podcast before. There's a lot of really cool benefits to it. And if you have questions about that, reach out to them. If you don't know the type of engine that you're looking for, if you go to dfcdiesel.com, there's a ton of info there. You can send an email or you can reach out to them. Also, they're working with Speed of Air pistons, which it's the only piston that pays for itself. And there's a lot of really cool technology behind it. So you can add that into your build and be able to get better fuel economy, increase power, increase torque, and better engine life out of it. Some of the most common engine applications or series of engines that they have with that lead time, a lot of them are in stock or they have really short lead times. So you can check your favorite retailer or go to dfcdiesel.com, check them out, see what's in stock, see what you can get. If you have questions, maybe you want to do something that's outside of the normal series of engines, they have tons of choices for rods, cranks, pistons, valve train upgrades, tons of different things. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over and check them out. I was thinking about that because I thought, it would make sense if I spend anywhere from $75,000 to $110,000 on a new diesel truck. I would want to create that pattern of tests like you mentioned, and I'd probably do one early on just to establish it, with low mileage. But then I would get something back and maybe freak out over some of the numbers on there and not understand why necessarily I'm seeing that. Or if you think of someone who does an engine rebuild, maybe it's not a racer, but maybe somebody's got a lot of mileage, they get a brand new reman engine in there, they're going to see different sorts of data, different than if they had 5 or 10 or 20,000 miles on it.
And you're right. And it's also important, like I said, to have that baseline. We have the baseline on the oil, kind of like the question you asked earlier about the comparisons, like what type of oil are you using. So we know how, and like I mentioned, each vehicle treats it differently. So if you start with a brand new vehicle and you just spend $100,000 on one of these trucks, the best thing you can do is drop $20 on an oil analysis and get a baseline right away. And now we're going to know how your truck treats that oil from the start. And these guys love it. When they start to get somebody that sends an oil analysis in every single oil change, and at least until you get going, I know we work with a lot of fleets that start there, and we'll do a lot of testing. I mean, 5,000-10,000 mile intervals, and then they might stretch out to 25,000, 30,000 mile intervals once they are comfortable with, they know how the machine's treating the oil. So it's something that we can help somebody out with that wants to protect one of those investments. But the earlier you start, the better. Unfortunately, most people come to oil analysis when something's gone wrong, and they're like, oh, what happened in there? And then they learn, and hopefully they're preventative in the future. But it's certainly something that it's the best way to protect an investment and allow some good advice on what's going on inside the engine and how to get the best bang out of your buck for lubricants and how they're protecting the engine.
Where do we go once we get this analysis back? Like, say, and maybe this is a part of some of the examples that you guys might have is, you know, what do I do if some of these levels are above average or above what would be normal? What do I do?
Well, if you're confused and you get an analysis and it's got something on there, again, good or bad, we always are open for a phone call and happy to walk you through it. But the first thing is the analysis itself. Again, we'll try to share some of these with you, but just a quick visual. All of a sudden you see some red boxes and some yellow boxes and some blue boxes.
Yeah.
And it's got a big key up here that tells you critical, excessive, severe, slightly above normal, slightly below normal. So there are some factors that are built into the report to give the average guy kind of just a quick scope, like thumbs up, thumbs down, look closely, or 5-alarm fire, call somebody. And that's when somebody like Kevin steps in, or any of our guys from the lab can help walk them through that. You want to maybe start with some examples of a real world, maybe a sample that somebody's had?
So the first example we had was a decrease in viscosity. So, we looked at the chart, we looked at all the oil analysis, everything was good except for viscosity. And
what's the application on this one?
So this is from a Demon 170 Challenger.
Oh, wow.
And so when the analysis was done, we had fuel dilution and a decrease in viscosity. So in diesels especially, that's a big action item. Some things aren't as clear or actionable. Where metals are starting to trend up a little bit, hey, let's keep an eye on it. But when we see fuel dilution, that's maybe an injector hanging up. So a customer knows right away, hey, I need to get my truck in and get the injectors checked out, because that's actually an early preventive maintenance item to prevent possibly an engine failure.
And this is somebody who it looks like they got 5 or 6 oil analysis stacked there. So they've been doing regular oil analysis, and to that point, their viscosity looked good.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we saw a drop in viscosity. So what happened? And on the same analysis where the drop in viscosity was, we see some very high fuel dilution.
Yeah, and it was a significant drop, 30% drop. So it dropped it out of grade, and he was obviously having problems.
And what, that was like a 40 weight oil originally?
Yes.
And so it dropped almost to a 20.
It went to a 30 weight.
Yeah. So
mid 30.
That's like putting the wrong oil in the vehicle, and now you're a 10 weight off, and especially a performance vehicle like that, that's now you're opening yourself up for a lot of wear, which we didn't see a lot of wear on that oil analysis. And this is a perfect example of why you do it. Like, it was a warning that you're having a fuel problem that's getting into the oil, that's thinning out the oil, and your next problem is going to be wear. And fortunately, this was caught before it really did some damage to the engine. And I'm sure this customer was advised to check the fuel system. And then the follow-up oil analysis looks like he's back to good.
Yeah, he must have done the repair, and he's back in the game. Everything looked
with no damage to the engine, and spotted before it could have been a problem.
Iron was in a good level. Yeah.
So it's just an example of how you got to take a few data points and put it together. And sometimes we can't dial it in exactly. Oh, you have an injector hung open, but we can give you 3 to 4 things to look at that the byproduct would be this result. And it really gives that person a good opportunity to define the problem before it is.
It makes a lot of sense with a lot of the fuel topics that we've talked about in the past, Kyle, with fuel quality, water, a whole bunch of different things that can happen, and just wear on injectors over time and being able to catch that. And I'm sure what would be something that happens to the engine when the weight drops that much? What other kind of wear would you say if it was a Power Stroke, Cummins, or Duramax and they didn't do anything with it right away? What would the next oil analysis show for maybe metals or other things that would pop up on it?
Yeah, so there's a couple different lubrication regimes. So where you see the big effect when the viscosity is low is in the boundary lubrication, and where you have boundary is like the starting and stopping, and versus like the skating is like water skiing, I guess, is the best way to describe the
my analogy.
hydrodynamic. So
I got the really bad examples that explain these nerds. So here's how I explain it. The 3 levels of it. Think about, have you ever been water skiing with like a wakeboard or something, and when that boat first starts to pull and you have all that resistance against the water, that's like your startup. And then once you start to pop up out of the water and the resistance is a little bit easier, that's your middle ground.
That's your mixed, yeah.
You're mixed. And then finally, once you're coasting on top of the water, it's a benefit of film strength, preventing that wear there. But there's a natural part of just being able to hydrodynamically skate on top of the water. And that's when you're really cooking and the oil's doing its job.
Yeah, so the hardest of the 3 to protect against is the boundary where you have the starting and stopping. So where we would see it show up on an oil analysis is the iron being a little bit high. So you get that from the cylinder wear, from the up and down movement of the piston.
And can you tell them about when you have that cylinder wear, the difference between the cylinder wall wear and the ring package wear? Like, we can even dial it down into that, and those would be different metal surfaces?
They would be. A lot of times rings are chrome. You see that show up in the chromium value.
And therefore, that gives you a different recommendation to the customer over where the problem's coming from. Either it's a fuel or maybe a coolant. It would be we give you a different side of the wear.
Yeah. Exactly.
And the fuel's coming from the top side, so you'd see more ring package wear then?
Yeah.
See, I kind of know what I'm talking about. You want to give another example?
Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, so one thing that's interesting, we talked, the oil analysis has a lot of capabilities, but doing the analysis early is important because what it's really looking at is particles that are 8 microns and below. And so these are microscopic particles that you can't see. Like if they were out of the oil and kind of laid out, you can only see maybe a 20 or 30 micron size particle, but these are 8 microns and below. So
a human hair is 40 micron, right?
Yeah, roughly 40 to 80.
Yeah. So you'd have to slice a human hair 40 times to get to micron size.
So if you think about how an engine would fail, it starts to make these small particles come off where we'd see those in an engine analysis. Left unchecked, those small particles start taking up the lubricating surface and start making bigger and bigger particles. So having
it's a snowball effect.
Yeah, a real snowball effect. So I have an example of bearing damage, but it actually didn't show up in the oil analysis because the oil analysis was done too late in the process. Had it been done a lot earlier, we'd have seen those 8 micron particles that were contributing to the iron or the lead and copper for the bearing wear. We would have seen that.
And we've seen that before when we've had catastrophic failures. I forget who tossed their engine block on the track last year when it launched out of the vehicle, but we got some oil out of it. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, actually looks good. Then the lab explained to me, it's so bad that the pieces are so big, they're outside of our little tiny microscope that we're actually investigating at. So the analysis really is on that preventative side. We're spotting it well before it becomes a problem. And when it gets that bad where you have a failure, you're past the radar of the world they live in.
Yeah.
I've got a cool one here that is the good example of the extended drain interval one.
Oh, yeah.
You want to share that? I stole it from you.
Yeah, so here's a customer that's running a bypass filter. And so if you're running extended drain intervals, some of the benefits of that is you're taking out those particles that not only cause engine wear, but they're also catalysts to oxidation reactions that happen within the oil. So here's an example of a customer. He was running a bypass filter. He had started out with 15,000 mile oil change intervals. And once he had a good analysis, he kept pushing it till he felt comfortable. And his last analysis was he went 43,000 miles on an oil analysis with a good oil analysis. And basically, some things that can happen with long periods running the oil, the viscosity could shear out of grade and the oil start to get a little bit thinner. It can get soot building up. The bypass filter prevents the contaminants from being in there, so that keeps the soot in order. This customer in particular started with our Blue Diamond PAO oil, which doesn't shear out of grade. So we've actually had customers that have run it a couple 100,000 miles with oil analysis and maintenance with a TBN. That additive package that depletes, they would get an oil analysis, see, oh, my TBN's 4, I need to put so many ounces in to bring it back up to a 10, and then they'll run another interval and then test it.
And we've talked about this, Patrick. We've done an episode on long intervals, and one of the unique aspects of it, going back to the 3 reasons why you have to change the oils, if you're using a PAO-based oil like this that can resist shearing for long periods of time, well, it's only as good as keeping it clean. Analysis is a way that we check soot level. We check how many particles are in there. Your average spin-on filter for any of your common Power Stroke, Duramax, Cummins are 15 to 20 microns?
Yeah.
About 15 to 20 microns, because they have to keep the oil flow to the engine. We got to keep the engine running. So the screen door can only be so tight, screening so much particle out of there. Whereas a bypass filter, you put that on, we can screen down to under 2 microns. And now you're getting all those particles out of there that are that 2 to 15 micron that are getting through the main filter. And it's not just the benefit of keeping those clean out, but like he mentioned earlier, those 5 to 6 micron size particles are the perfect size to just sit on your cylinder wall, ride your rings, add extra wear, and then create that snowball effect of adding more particles to it. And then you start creating oxidation problems, and everything just tumbles from there. So the only way to see that is through an oil analysis. And we can measure straight down to that micron. And it's kind of fun to watch these too. When you see a guy like that throws a bypass filter on a vehicle, like in interval, and all of a sudden the oil cleans up. And we have some really cool testing from, I'll supply that to him, of adding bypass filtration onto a vehicle with dirty oil, and watching it clean the oil back to container clean oil while running the vehicle. But you only see that in oil analysis. And you just know that you've just extended the life of your engine quite a bit, because you just cut the wear metals down quite a bit. But the average guy who's doing the same thing, you can't feel that in the seat of your pants. You're not going to see that. You're only going to see that when you're the guy that has the 400, 500,000 mile engine that's still running good. But you got to pay the dues early. And analysis is one of those things that allows you to pat yourself on the back and be like, I'm doing a good job and I'm taking care of this. So it's just a good, safe peace of mind.
It's a really interesting part of oil analysis in general. And then I imagine even more so specifically if I did it to a truck and sent it in and got the results, is being able to avoid some of the catastrophic failures that I talk about on other episodes with other people, or the repair costs that come with a fuel system or a long block or short block, something like that, is having that data. Because I think in general, like in the beginning, Kyle, we talked about why most people don't do it. I think and maybe a major reason is they just look at the owner's manual. It says every 5,000 or 7,500 or whatever it says on there. and they just do it and then go about it. And then all of a sudden you hit this mileage marker and you're looking at a $10,000 to $15,000 engine, and they want to avoid that. And it takes all the guesswork out, which I think is where a lot of the feedback or conversations or questions come from. Is, it can center around what brand, what weight, how do I do this? But if you don't have the data like you guys just went through, I don't know where to start. I actually need that kind of data. And I think at intervals, like you mentioned, doing them consistently to build kind of a database of my truck, my engine, to know what's going on with it.
Yeah, trend reporting is the huge aspect of it. So that's the second step. We got to get them starting to do it in the first place. So hopefully some people that watch today start doing some analysis, and then continue with it. And you give these guys a bunch of data points to develop trends, and we see this a lot. Like we're doing a lot more with pullers now. We're a new title sponsor of the Pro Pulling League. We've been sponsoring the NTPA for a long time. So now we got this whole new wave of pullers coming in. And one of the big things with the pullers is how many hooks can I go? And as I'm getting people to start using our racing oils and stuff, it's no different than the average guy who's doing a 3,000 mile interval religiously. And I'm an oil company telling them, no, you can get more out of our oil. And they look at us like we're crazy. Like, well, don't you want a guy buying your oil every 3,000 miles? It's like, sure, it keeps the lights on here, but we want that engine protected, but we want the consumer to have a value add out of it. We want you to have, and if you've got so much money to burn that you want to just change your oil every 3,000 miles, well, at least let me talk you into a better oil so that we can reduce the wear while we're doing it. So that's where you cannot help anybody without oil analysis from that standpoint. So whether it's the everyday guy on his trying to figure out how many miles he should be going on his truck, or a 10,000 horsepower tractor puller that has been religiously changing his oil, his really expensive oil every 2 hooks, a poor oil every 2 hooks because he's saving money. Well, I can show him in an analysis that, yeah, maybe our high-end oils are pretty expensive, but now you can go 6 hooks rather than 2. And the price of our oil that goes 6 hooks versus the cheap oil that you have to refill 3 times, it turns out to be a better deal to use a better oil that's protecting it better. And actually, it's easier for you. You're changing it less. So the only way you can see this is with analysis. And most of the time I have anybody who wants to have that question or say, how long should I be running? I'll always say, let's start with an analysis. Let's measure your wear metals. Patrick, you and I have talked about how people are very oil loyal. We're an additive company. We love our FR3. It's a nanocarbon that does great anti-wear that you can add to any oil you like. So regardless of what brand you use, I always tell people, if you like your oil, keep your oil. But I challenge you to try the FR3 in your oil. And here's what we'll do. We'll do an oil analysis with your brand oil on your regular interval. Say it's 5,000. Let's change the oil. Let's add some FR3 to it. So you keep your oil. Let's try our additive. And then we'll do another 5,000 mile interval and check the oil analysis. And I guarantee you, every time I do this, we drop wear metals in half. And people go, wow, like just a little bit of additive. And over the life of my engine, if I'm cutting my wear metals in half in a 5,000 mile interval, man, that's extending the life of my engine by 2. And then, if we can go further and get them on even a better full oil, you'll see the wear metals even drop more. But until then, it's a bunch of internet warriors that love to, that's why I generally stay out of some of these oil battles on the internet. Not a single one of them's ever putting up oil analysis. They're just telling you how great their oil is because their engine's never blown up. And I'm sure we'll have somebody in the comments here telling me the same thing, but let's put the analysis up. We like to let the data show the way, and you can be proud of what you run. And I hope everyone's running a good oil and protecting their investment. But if you're not doing analysis, then you're just kind of talking. That's it.
I think it's important to, like you mentioned, not just do the analysis, but then take action with it and get recommendations. And so, like, for somebody listening, they've heard us talk about why it's important. and how they can extend the life of their engine and reduce wear. How do they connect with Hot Shot Secrets and be able to get one of these and be able to kind of build that trend reporting that we talked about and get on a plan?
Well, let me get this one right here. This is the price on it. Oh. So we sell our oil analysis kits right on the website. You can go to hotshotsecret.com. I believe we have 5 different types of oil analysis. The standard one is $24. It comes with a prepaid mailer back, so it's very, very affordable. The next step up would be to add particle count to it, kind of like we talked about earlier, so we can do a little deeper dive into what size particle you need. After that, I'm not going to worry about the other ones. You can upgrade to a ferrography. Now you're getting into like the $150 range. It's a pretty heavy duty test, but as I always advise everybody, just get the standard oil test. That's it. Just get the $25 one. If there's something catastrophic in there and we get a bunch of red flags, we can then upgrade to a more higher level test with the sample you sent. So just stick with the basic $24 one. It goes a long way. You can buy that on our website, ships to your house with a mailer that ships right back to our lab. Or you can get one from any of our independent dealers. We got dealers nationwide. So if you go to our website, you can also punch in the where to buy section and find a local. I see a lot of your sponsors are some of our dealers, so there's a lot of shops out there and other partners in the industry that sell our products. They can make our kits available to you too. Those also come right back to us, and we reach out to you if we see a problem. If not, you get an email, and do they get a direct mailer too?
Yeah, they can.
So you can get the printed out version mailed to your door if you'd like to physically hold it, or it comes as a PDF to your email box, and our phone number is right on that. There is a note on there. It's a quick analysis of what it is, so it's a little bit of an education of what to see. Certainly, if something's red flagged, critical, or something, we'll get a pretty thorough explanation in there. But our phones are open, and we'll reach out to you to walk you through that report.
It was really cool to kind of take a deep dive into this and learn a little bit more of how to protect these investments and not have to get an engine when you don't want to. I mention that a lot, but it's really fun when you build a truck when you're ready to do it and you want to do it and you've planned for it. It's not very fun when it's a work truck and you're stranded and you're trying to get parts and get into a shop and there's a wait time for it. And to be able to approach that and interpret this data in a productive way to make your truck last longer. So it was really cool to chat with you as always, Kyle. Kevin, it was great to meet you, get your expertise and insights on this. And I mean, you sold me on doing one just to see like, where am I? Where's my engine at? And then be able to build that data.
It's got your name on it right here, Patrick.
I know where to get them now. It was very cool chatting with you guys today. I appreciate your time. It was awesome as always.
Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it, man.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code TDP2520 to get 20% off your entire cart. If you're in the market for a new knife for hunting, fishing, EDC, something around the job site, around the house, they got you covered with a bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, handle design, different opening mechanisms, and their whole lineup's designed to meet any budget that you might have. We really appreciate them offering that discount code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. So again, if you're in the market, head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code TDP2520 and get 20% off your order. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters, Tyler Lowen at 23 Diesel, Robert, Cutter Up Rob, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube and podcast apps. Follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 9 of the Diesel Podcast and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2025. Till next time, keep the shiny side up.